just go through. You know, the law can be boring for you. I think it's fascinating, and everybody should be a lawyer because it's the best job ever. And I tell everybody, all the young people that I meet, they should do that. I work in elder law, and it is a very fertile ground for the kind of work that I do because there are so many needs of the elderly. And I feel lucky to be able to work in this area. When you are, and my talk is going to jump around from a bunch of different things. So we're going to have some estate planning, some medical assistance things, maybe elderly later, and then some general topics. I'll try to keep my remarks to about 30 minutes, which will give time for my dear friend Joel. I'm super delighted to speak with because we were Rotarians when we were attorneys together out in Excelsior. So one of the things sometimes when you get older, you get dementia, or your family member has dementia. It's really important to get a proper diagnosis of the kind of dementia because your future days, years, the track of how that will unfold is dictated by the nature of the kind of dementia. So you need the proper diagnosis. It could be that there's Alzheimer's in that individual's health care. Could be Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's, frontal temporal dementia, vascular dementia. All of those present with some confusion. Some have more behaviors than others. By behaviors, I mean, going into somebody else's room and touching them or being aggressive when the person was never aggressive before. It might be that they have terrible hallucinations as part of their dementia. They're not all the same, and having the proper diagnosis helps you identify how do we take care of this person as a care provider? What am I looking at in terms of types of placement and what it'll look like? Don't do it alone. Don't do this alone. Get a support group, bring in your family members, and talk to the support group. We love these people, right? My personal experience is I have a brother who passed away with dementia. He was 62. He was 50. And my dad did too. So we love them, and with the dad especially, I want to defer to him. What do you think, Dad? Don't do that. Because the person can't think clearly. So we need to kind of change our speech to say, here's what we're going to do. And kind of make it like, here's the next thing we're going to do, rather than asking a bunch of open-ended questions to someone. In my world, we call that deferring to the person who has dementia, which only puts more burden and stress on that person because actually they don't even know how to order a sandwich at a restaurant. Why would I know how to organize our finances anymore? A sandwich is difficult. So I would go and say, how about the tuna sandwich, Dad? And he'd say, sure, that sounds great. And it just takes all the stress away. So it's important to kind of change the roles. Oftentimes we defer to that person, and now we need the thing to do is to be supportive by not deferring, which seems, again, a little unusual, but it's a good idea. There are lots of options for kinds of care. There's lots to keep track of. I got a phone, I got advance the slide, for God's sake. I'm going to put my phone here so I can keep track of my time. Well, I can see that there. I can see that. This is where you want to call somebody like Tracy and say, Start Solutions, what do I have here? What are my options? Do I need respite just for a little break? Maybe just daycare? That would work out. So you need to identify what is it that I need. Do I need someone do I need my person to move to a different place in an apartment that offers some services like assisted living? Is it just a daycare? So there's lots of different ways to do it. There isn't just work like a maniac at home with my loved one and then go to the nursing home. There's a lot of in-betweens, and those in-betweens will keep your person at home longer. Take the daycare situation, go twice a week. Then you get to go out with your friends and have a nice lunch and take a load off. Connect a little bit. Those are the things we need to give ourselves a little breather. Just even having somebody come in to do housekeeping. A lot of these things can be paid for by government programs. And a lot of payment for these things out of your own money is going to keep your person home longer, which is just going to make the whole thing cheaper. So get help and say, I can't do it anymore. sooner than you think you should, because you probably can't, and it'll be better for that person and better for you. Obviously, we know about nursing home care, we know what that is, we know what the VA is, if you're a vet. When you talk to your elder law attorney, and I am not one of these specialists, I am not a VA specialist, I have dear friends who are, it's its own world, and I am not a VA specialist. So when you talk to your elder law attorney and you have a vet, and you're planning to use the VA as an option, talk to a vet specialist. Don't just go with any estate planner or elder law attorney. So, nobody wants to get a divorce. I mean, some people want to get a divorce. I got a divorce. But I mean, usually by the time, TMI, usually by the time you're at this stage in your lives, you figure, we're not going to divorce, we're going to figure it out. And then you hit this roadblock. Dementia, long-term care, catastrophic health care costs. Is this a good idea? Can I consider it? How would that look? Sometimes it is a reasonable option to divorce. And the reason why I say that is when you apply for medical assistance, they don't just look at your ill spouse's assets and say, well, what does she own? They look at the whole group. So when you look at the whole group, all of a sudden you're looking at having to pay a lot more money. So you could do a Medicaid compliant divorce. It's not your average divorce. Even if you have a prenuptial, Medicaid does not care about that. Because they are trying, no one wants to pay. We don't want to pay that much money, the government doesn't want to pay that much money, but our loved one needs the care. So we're trying to balance that out. The prenuptial will be ignored in the world of medical assistance. If somebody needs medical assistance and you get a divorce, they're not going to say, she said she'd only take the house and I could have all the rest of the assets. No, they won't look at that. There is a new animal out there in the law, which I learned about a couple of years ago at a NALA conference, called an in-marriage quadro. So for those of you who have divorced, a quadro is how you are dividing up those retirement assets. And you don't want to cash in because of your tax. But you could do an in-marriage quadro for the purpose of having a Medicaid compliant divorce so you don't have to worry about the tax part. It's complex. I've never done one. You need a court order. But I would love an opportunity to have this, do this for a client. The facts have not come to me yet since I learned about it. Many people are worried about, do I have, what bills am I actually responsible for in marriage? And then I slow down and think, okay, well, under what fact scenario? So as people are getting older and everybody's healthy and they're just spending money and then people die, your regular life, right, that we hope for. We get old, we spend, we die. If they're an overspender, which a lot of people are, you get into the world of, I don't know, I'm not there yet, but my guess is you don't have much to do and Amazon's there and people deliver packages and it feels like Christmas. I go into these places and people have just so much stuff of little tchotchke things you can't even imagine. And they have a ton of debt. We are not responsible for our spouse's credit card debt. So when the money is really tight, I tell my clients, don't pay the credit card. Don't pay the credit card. You're trying to get onto medical assistance. We're trying to protect your assets. Don't pay the credit card bill. Or somebody's going to die. Don't pay the credit card bill. But the health care bill we cannot avoid when we're married to each other. There's a separate statute in the law that says if you're a married couple and he took an ambulance to the hospital and then he died, you have to pay the medical bills. They can get you for it. Whereas his credit card debt, you're like, I can't explain if I was going to spend it. That's just the way it was. You don't have to pay it. But because you're responsible for the medical debt, that makes it a little bit different. Now let me change the fact scenario because this was particularly pointed out to me by Tracy. If you are your aunt's healthcare agent, you are not responsible for her medical bills because she's your aunt. You're only responsible for the medical bills of your married partner, your spouse. So if your dad has medical bills, you don't have to pay those. It's vis-a-vis a married
Concept to remember.
a power of attorney, somebody acting under a power of attorney called an attorney of fact. They're not really liable for the bills of that person. They're just kind of a messenger doing work on their behalf, but they're not liable. So feel free to throw in to the opportunity of serving your family member and do the right thing and take care of them. Be a healthcare agent, be a financial power of attorney. You won't be held liable for having to pay their debts. You do have to not steal their money. There's liability in that regard. So that helps people understand a little bit more about these roles. We just dipped into a little bit about the finances. When people get sick and can't think clearly, just in general, regular speak, could be dementia, could be just getting a little older, there are ways that we can have authority over their finances. One of them is a power of attorney, which I do recommend, and even for those of you who have children going off to college, have them get a power of attorney and a healthcare directive right away. Because if you're in my family, you drink too much, you end up in the hospital, and the doctors won't talk to you because you're not the healthcare agent for your son. Which was a little, that's when I started doing this. I should have had everybody sign a power of attorney and healthcare directive on the way to college. But you can handle the finances using a power of attorney, we get that. If you don't have that, and think of this for yourselves too, not just the person you're thinking of taking care of. It's very cheap to do a power of attorney. I still recommend you use a lawyer because many powers of attorney that are downloaded on the internet and signed are done wrong and then they don't work. Go to a lawyer, get one drafted up, because if you don't, you'll end up with a conservatorship, which is a court hearing, which could be contested, meaning it's a trial, meaning people are putting up evidence, meaning they're doing discovery, they're fighting, they're arguing, the lawyers are in front of the judge 25 times before you get a determination. That's very expensive. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And those 3,000 just start the file. A conservatorship is really expensive. Power of attorney is super cheap. And they give you the same authority, which is the authority to handle a person's assets. You could act as a trustee. That's also a way that you can handle the person's assets. Then you're in charge of the assets in the trust. So then you're in charge of the trust assets. If you're a power of attorney, you can handle things that aren't in the trust, like a retirement account. So it's good to sometimes have both if you needed a trust. My clients, when they're getting ready to, or thinking one day might have to apply for medical assistance, they ask me, well, of the pots of money that I have, like an account I inherited from my grandma, it's like an individual stock account. Or I have my IRA or my husband's 401k, or we have the house, and then I have my MAD money, which is just like a savings account with 70,000 in it or something. The first thing you always spend is the retirement account of the sick one. You know, I'm speaking a little bit crude, but if somebody is going to be the one most likely to need the long-term care, we're going to try to get that person on medical assistance. We don't want to have to cash a retirement account to do it. So if we have to fix the roof, let's use that person's retirement account, fix the roof as we go along. So when you're looking at which pot do I spend first, you look at each other and say, which one's going to go first? You know, who's got the diagnosis? This is terrible, but it's true. If you have a bad heart, we're not worried about you. But if you have dementia in your family, pick the one with the dementia in the family. Because bad heart, you just kind of go. Whereas dementia, you linger. So it's terrible, but this is kind of how I'm thinking about it in my mind's eye. You can fix the house, but when you're applying for medical assistance, it should be fix-ups to the house that were necessary, not just like it decided to go, mid-century modern instead of this Tudor stuff I've been living with. That's not what we're talking about. You can fix and repair a house. Medicare, check out the options, and I think Tracy actually is a great resource for this. Check out the options when you're trying to get free stuff, which we all are, no shame in that. Medicare will pay for things like that wheelchair. Medicare will pay for things like the bed. When you talk to the people at the care facility after rehab, they say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to help you with that. Call Tracy, because I just had lunch with her, and she said, of course they can help you get that Medicare, that wheelchair. The Medicare will pay for it, and your family won't have to. So they're a very good resource for things like that. Okay, 10 minutes left, and counting. Medical assistance deserves more than 10 minutes, but I'm going to give you kind of a broad brush. In generally speaking, people worry that if we get on medical assistance, sure, his nursing home bill may be covered, but I'm just going to be left eating like saltines and Spam. That's not true. We have anti-impoverishment rules, which means anti-spousal impoverishment rules. The spouse who's living at home doesn't have to have zero money. They get to have their own chunk. So part of what we do is we organize your money, we elder law attorneys, we organize your money into the right pots that give you the most amount of money and still follow the law. And in my office, we say we're not committing fraud today against the U.S. government. We didn't do it yesterday, we're not doing it today. Because it's easy to want to try to sneak or lower your voice or something. So like anytime anybody lowers their voice, they're committing fraud for sure. So medical assistance is going to deem your assets to be part of the whole couple, and then they'll organize, and then we organize it from there. If you're over 65, you can get on medical assistance if your assets look at the right picture. If you're under 65, you can also get on medical assistance if you have to establish if you're disabled. My brother was 50 when he got Alzheimer's. You can be over 65, but not going to a nursing home, just headed to like an adult foster care, and that's a different Medicaid program called EW. I'm not going to get into the whole alphabet soup, I just kind of wanted to give you a broad sense of how this stuff works. They treat assets differently, and just because you have a revocable trust, that's just like wearing saran wrap and thinking it's a dress. It's not going to work. It's not a dress, it's saran wrap, and they look through that trust like you would saran wrap, and they say, I see you got a bunch of money in that trust, like you won't use your money and come back when you're broke. So a revocable trust, no good. Tracy asked me to talk about application date. So today, we're in August, and if I wanted to get on medical assistance for a client, I could apply on August 29th, and it would go retroactive to August 1st. So you can apply any time in that month, and have it go retroactive to the first of the month. If my client had been eligible on, 3 months prior, I could apply for that date too, but they would, eligible means did their money line up. They allow people applying for medical assistance. If you're single, the asset limit is $3,000, not much. If you're married, the spouse who's well, we call it the community spouse, $154,140, that number changes. That's how much you can have in available assets. All your other assets have to be in different other categories. But you can have up to $154,000. And the trick is how do we get our money to be in the right pot so that the only available money is $154,000. For that, I recommend you work, with your elder law attorney. It doesn't have to be me, it can be any of them. There's tons of great ones. We do it. But your standard estate planning attorney is probably not going to do it. They're going to refer it to us. So medical assistance has asset limits, and they have income as well. It isn't about a limit, but it helps you understand that if you're the one, I have a woman right now whose husband just went into a facility, we're going to get him on medical assistance, and her old boss just called her and said, hey, would you come back and do a project for us? She's 84. She's, in finance. She's going to do a project. And she called me, she said, can I earn income? She can earn as much income as she wants. They don't count the income of the community spouse. If you're 54 years old and your 56-year-old husband has dementia, your income is not counted. So there are some income pluses. The income for the person who is receiving medical assistance, who maybe has a bunch of pensions and para and MRSRA and all of the different pensions that people have, most of that income is going to go toward paying for the facility, but some can get carved out to pay for the Medicare premium, pay for insurance for their health insurance, pay for buying shaving cream, so they don't count all the income. It gets a more complicated calculation if you're on EW. Quick question only, yeah.
Personal needs allowance 125 a month?
Yeah, so it's ridiculous, you get to keep. And the question is the personal needs allowance 125 per month? And the answer is yes. Now, what can we buy for 125 a month? I don't even, if you smoke cigarettes, I don't even think you could afford your cigarette habit on that, but it's not enough. And then there are some income set asides for a spouse sometimes. My spouse was a stay-at-home individual who has a social security check of $300, and they're relying on their partner's social security check entirely. Well, if I have really low income in a spouse, I can actually use some of the income of the spouse. Again, a lot of complications in medical assistance, and work with your attorneys about how does yours actually fit in, but that gives you somewhat of an idea. This, in broad terms, is divided. This slide divides the assets. Some are available, count that they're mostly available. Those that are unavailable are things like stuff you can't get your hands on. You're about to get an inheritance through the probate of your aunt, but they haven't given you the money yet. It's unavailable. If you have an annuity that has in fact been annuitized, which is a good key about how to protect money, that's not available because it's just an income stream now. I can't get at the principal. If you have jointly held real estate, like with your kids, think about this for your cabins, you guys. You're 65 years old, you got a $700,000 cabin. When you die, you plan to give it to your kids. Why don't you put it out now? Because you're well, you're healthy. And 5 years will go back and go by, and it won't be in the look-back period. If you're jointly with the kids, they can't force those kids to sell that asset. So another good idea about how to protect our own money for us that's legal, which is a good idea. Excluded assets are things like your homestead to a certain level, funerals, a car, and then some transfers are excluded. You could give your house to your kid because your kid took care of you for 2 years, and but for that care, you would have been in the facility. You can actually transfer the house to that child, and it's not improper. So transfers are really looked at closely to make sure you're not saying, I'm broke, and then they say, well, what'd you give away last week? Well, $500,000 to my son. Well, go get that money back and make him pay for your care. That's fair. But if you follow the rules, there are ways that we can preserve some of the inheritance for the children. Here's just a few other little tips that I've come up with. Everybody should have a healthcare directive. Everybody should have a power of attorney, because we're all going to probably need those at one point. You might be in Paris and decide, let's sell a house. Kids, grab that document I did and go sell the house for us. It doesn't mean that you're disabled or you're going to get old or you don't know what you're doing. Don't fight against, I'm in charge and I don't trust anyone. We need each other. So if you got someone you trust, go ahead and lean into it. If you're not a spouse, you're not liable for all those bills. Start talking to your attorneys now about some of this planning, because we're all on the same train, and some people are a little farther down the track than we are, but we're all on that same train. We're all headed that way. I tell my clients, when you're headed to the hospital and somebody fell and you think it's a broken hip, call me before you get to the hospital, because sometimes they get discharged from the hospital to home too early, and if you go home, you don't get the 100 days of rehab. So I want people to stay in, I want 3 midnights in hospital to get the 100 days of rehab. So that, I say, call me when you're at the hospital. In the family, I recommend if you have kids, you can bring into the pool of trust. Do it right away when you're making your will. Let them know what you're thinking. You can give your assets to your children. Just, if you're in the bloodline, you get your share by virtue of the bloodline. Some people say, well, that person doesn't need the money, so I'm going to give it to the one who really needs it. It's your own personal decision. The one who doesn't need the money might disclaim it. and then it would go over to the people who do need it. So that's just some things to think about. How you leave your money, who you want to leave it to. I like to write wills that when I'm dead and gone, the document that I wrote for my family causes them to be closer together, not further away. And sometimes that is tricky, but it's worth thinking about, well, how would I do that? What would that look like? We didn't talk about paying medical assistance back. But when you get on medical assistance and your loved one lives there for 5 years and it's paid for by the government and then he dies, you don't have to pay the government back right away because you're the spouse and you're still alive. Because you can't collect for any of this stuff until you both die, husband and wife, or husband and husband, whatever you are. When the spouses die, that's when they can collect. They can't collect when the first one dies. But they will try to put a lien on everything and collect when you're both gone. So that's probably okay. You know, if we can save stuff for kids, great. If we can't, mostly we want to make sure that we ourselves are cared for. And that's what the plan is there for. I think of this type of law, it's not a river. It's not a lake. It's not just like a stagnant thing and everything remains the same. And we put together a plan and we never have to think about it again. No. Everything in our lives is like a river. And these facts are changing all the time. Meet with your attorneys to check in and make sure you're doing it right. Because you may come back and say, I have a grandchild who has a disability. How does that change our situation? I didn't know about that before. So like I say, I think this is an amazing area of law to work in. I feel grateful for it. I get to help people every day in situations when they're at their most vulnerable. And it makes a difference in their lives. It actually makes a really big difference in my life. So I know that was way more than you ever imagined we would cover it into like 30 minutes. I am super excited to introduce to you Joel Smith. He and I did work together early on in Excelsior. We were both Rotarians and young attorneys. So it was some time ago. And I was delighted to see that he's on the list for your speaker next. He's been practicing for 34 years. He's a graduate of St. John's, so you know that's one of the top schools in our community, plus a graduate of the University of Minnesota Law School. He's a partner at Smith. And for over 25 years, he and his partner represented elders and their families harmed by neglect and abuse in nursing homes and assisted living. So when I have a case where we need to go after them, we need to sue that place because my person got injured, I always refer to Joel and always have from the day that I met him. This year, the State Bar actually gave him a big award, which is the Professional Excellence Award. I don't have that award, but Joel probably deserves it. Here you go, Joel, it's all yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Quick show of hands, maybe. How many folks here are willing to share your lives are working without pay to take care of a family member who needs help? Ethan. How many folks here are taking care of a family member without pay? How many of you take care of people but for pay, whether you're a nurse, a nursing aide, physical therapist? How many folks here are responsible for how good this organization is? Board members, contributors. Excellent. Well, I am Joel Smith, and that's enough of that picture. With me here today, with us here today, is one of the other attorneys in my firm, Kara Rahimi, over there in the corner, and a wonderful attorney, just like Margaret is. But our practice is, I think Margaret's practice is to try to help people avoid the car crash. Sometimes the crash occurs, they have to deal with those issues. We get involved after the car crash. Something bad has happened, assessing who's responsible for that, and if anybody, and what to do about it. Unfortunately, it's good for our business, it's bad socially. We get about 700 to 800 referrals a year. Not all of them are, things you have to pay a lot of attention to before you say, that's not something we can help you with. But most of them are real people with real problems that deserve legal representation. We can only take about 2% of those cases. So about 98% of those 700 to 800 cases, there's not a lot of people in our community who do what my partner and I and Kara do. It's not easy work. It is specialized knowledge, and you want to be careful about how much of your own life you give up to do your job. So I wanted to share with you here today some of the cases we see. I hope most of what I talked about has nothing to do with anything going on in your life or what will happen in your life. I suspect that almost everything that Margaret talked about will relate in some way to what you're dealing with or may deal with in your lives. So hopefully this is just a curiosity that you might have as opposed to, I really need to know this. So I'm going to go, this is a pretty 10,000 foot sort of overview of these things. I wanted to share with you the types of injuries we typically see. And the first slide, unfortunately, is a very unpleasant slide. I'm happy you're not serving breakfast here today. I won't leave it up there very long. But there are things called bed sores, pressure sores. Doctors call them decubitus ulcers. There's all kinds of terms for these injuries. It's when a person is left in a position with pressure, usually on their tailbone area. It could be elbows, the back of their head, but the tailbone tends to be the biggest concern. There's another part of the bottom called the ischial tuberosity. It's the bottom of your hip bone. And so those are the areas that are most vulnerable to skin breakdown. Your body is deteriorating because of pressure, the blood flow's not getting through there and so forth. I can't say it's easy to avoid, but if people do their job to help reposition people off, vulnerable people off of those parts of their bodies regularly, and there's not some other medical condition that explains why their skin is breaking down, you end up with a hole in your body. The skin is breaking down, and it's in a part of the body that's susceptible because a lot of times these folks are also incontinent. And if they're not being trimmed and repositioned, they're probably not getting the care they need for their incontinence. So you have urine and feces and things like that getting into this now portal into their body, and now that's poisoning the body. They become septic. So this is a photograph of the type of pressure injuries we see. This is the backside of the person's tailbone area. This is it's a stage 4 pressure injury, and the skin is gone, the tissue is gone. It goes down to the bone. And usually there's a high risk of sepsis that goes with that. And sepsis, your blood is poisoned. Sexual abuse, none of us like to think about that. That's why I think I got into this practice eventually. When I was in college, my grandmother was in a facility and she was sexually abused. I didn't know as much about what was going on as my dad did. I'm sure there were things that he didn't share with me. I know he was brokenhearted about it. Nobody seemed to do anything about it. What's the law enforcement doing? I didn't know about things like departments of health and ombudsman and things like that back then. But it is amazing what human beings are capable of in terms of it's hard to imagine why somebody would do that. There's physical assault. The more serious the injury is, the more likely we will be able to do that. It could be not only by other residents, who are being supervised properly. Or it could be by a staff member who, again, it's hard to believe that somebody that should be getting up in the morning wanting to help people ends up hurting somebody intentionally. Medication errors are real common. Some of those errors are, you can fix it. Other errors are very significant, like somebody who needs their insulin. Why didn't they get their insulin? Or somebody who needs their blood thinner and they're not getting it. So medication errors are a big issue for us. Dehydration, malnutrition, again, usually this goes to there's not enough staff and there's not enough supervision. And infections, UTI, urinary tract infections are the biggest, most common type of infection. It's something that the facility should be watching out for. What are the risks? What are the signs? I'm sure people in this room have UTIs, and the older we get, typically, the less that person is able to advocate for themselves or recognize for themselves what's going on. And an untreated UTI, your sentence is death. It's going to happen. So, avoidable, treatable, but if you don't get the care that you need, it's fatal and expensive. All of these are expensive injuries that could have been avoided if somebody had provided the proper care. Falls and drops are common. This is a segment of our society that's very vulnerable to falls. You can't prevent every fall, but that doesn't mean that you can't prevent any falls. So we have to look very carefully at who was responsible for taking care of that. Did they assess the patient, the resident properly? And sometimes falls happen, and the facility did everything that's reasonably expected of them. But again, we're looking at whether somebody dropped the ball. And drops from where mechanical lifts, wire lifts, things like that shouldn't happen. If the equipment's working properly, it's being used properly, that's usually the problem we have. And if somebody gets dropped from a wire lift, they're falling for maybe 5 feet. Guess what's the heaviest part of the body? Their head. And we're not talking about a gymnastics floor, routine floor, where it's messy and cushy. It's usually a tile floor or a hard floor with some sort of industrial covering over it. The outcome's not good. And wandering and all over. Some people are allowed to leave the care facility. Others aren't and shouldn't. And in Minnesota, that can be a real problem in the summertime when it's very, very hot. A lot of these places are located near highways, or other busy roads, or drainage ditches, or even in the nursing home or care facility itself, there's laundry facilities. The hot water is very, very hot. Make sure that things are sanitized, and if they are exposed to that, it usually is fatal for this population. So those are the types of injuries we see, among others, but those are the most common. The thing we usually ask right off the bat is, okay, I can see the date that the injury occurred. Let's look at the calendar. Did they get admitted to the facility on Friday or Saturday or a Sunday or a holiday? Did an injury occur on those? There are studies out there that show an increase in the risk or the occurrence of injuries on a weekend or at night. The main staff is gone, and or holidays. And so that's one of the first questions we look at is, okay, where are the calendars that does this fit? But sometimes these injuries end up on the front page of the paper or the front page of the Sunday. This is a case that we handled a couple of years ago. This is a man who was in the advanced memory care unit of the nursing home, which was on the 3rd floor. He had tried, he was a painter, so he knew how windows were constructed. He thought, because of his dementia, that there was a baby that he was responsible for taking care of out in his car. Well, there was no car, there was no baby, but in his mind, he is absolutely determined to go save his baby out in his car. So he had been caught removing the screws out of a window He's leaning out the window, yelling at somebody down on the ground. Fortunately, they got him that day and moved him to a higher level memory care unit. And he kept telling people, I'm leaving, I have to get out of here, I have to get out of here. Supposedly they checked the windows and they were all safe and so forth. And guess who goes out the third story of the window? I don't know how he survived. One tough dude landed on his back 3 floors below, so boss got pretty good, but he lived. Medical expenses were very expensive to treat that. The nursing home and their insurer thought, we're not paying anything, we didn't do anything wrong. The jury disagreed, and in that case they awarded $1.4 million for, not so much to compensate, but to hold the care facility responsible, who they listened, the jury had listened to the nursing home and their lawyers say they didn't do anything wrong, they didn't do anything wrong. Well, you can keep saying it, but if the jury doesn't buy it, it becomes offensive after a while. I think they were offended. Another case against the same facility, 4 months later, another trial, same insurance company, same corporate entity. They fed the wrong food to a guy who needed a special diet. Dementia, who was able to take care of himself. They didn't supervise him, they were supposed to. And they fed him a big chunk of beef. That didn't go well, got stuck in his throat, choked, and he died. We didn't do anything wrong. And the jury disagreed. Sometimes these stories end up not only on the front page of the Sunday paper. This is a story that the investigative reporters at the Star Tribune have spent a long time, with a little bit of help from some lawyers that have had cases against that facility called Northridge up in New Hope. It's huge. It's for profit. And the Star Tribune not only ran the story on the Sunday paper, they created their own separate, a whole new section of the paper just for this story, with this new label for the nursing home called Grathwol. 350 some beds in this facility. So I think it's good that the attention gets out there. Things don't always, it's not always that great. These are families that had, or loved ones who had families watching out for them. The stories I can tell is what happens to the people who don't have family coming to visit or friends coming to visit. We have ombudsmen, if they know about it, can come in and advocate. We have the Department of Health, which can come in and investigate and advocate. But I think it's much less likely that that's going to happen unless there's a family or a friend who's watching out for these people. And these are people who, the cases I showed you about, they had family members coming every single day. So who's responsible? There's a licensee for the care facility. Oftentimes that's really kind of like a shell. It's created to employ the employees, but all the money passes through them to go to the parent company. This is the larger company that owns lots of nursing homes. So for us, one of the big things we do is we follow the money. And why is, not only what happened, but why did it happen? In our experience, the caregivers, the frontline people, yeah, I think they get rubber hose before they testify and everything else, but they didn't wake up that morning and hope that something happened, or they didn't care about these people. They're compromised by the lack of funding, the lack of sufficient staff, lack of resources, lack of training, lack of supervision. And when we follow the money in the facility, it usually goes up to corporate people that really all they focus on is the fiscal part of it, not the care that's being delivered. Then there's management companies. Somebody will go to the trouble of creating a company to get the license to operate the place. There's a parent company that owns that company, and then they'll hire a management company to actually run the facility. Oftentimes, the management company is very closely related. in the business world to the company that's hired them. Sometimes it's the same person signing on behalf of both companies for that management agreement. The corporate company has a designee who signs the contract for the management, and it's the same person signing the contract on behalf of the management company, because they're owned by the same people. Then a lot of times we see nursing homes, assisted living facilities are hiring staff, not hiring staff, but hiring companies outside their business to provide staff. The cases we see, those folks, I think they come in and mean to do well, but they don't get the training, they don't get the information, they don't get the support, and they don't live there. And this is not their place. They're coming in as a substitute caregiver. It's still the facility's responsibility for them. But when you have somebody who's ignorant, or who showed up to be one thing, but then they get given a different position to perform, they just don't have the knowledge or the chops to take care of the people. And when something bad happens, we see that oftentimes. There could be a pharmacy issue, there's laboratories, when we talk about the UTI. Well, somebody has to do a blood draw or a urine draw to send that into the lab to get that tested, and are we dealing with an infection or not? Could be therapy. And then, so anyway, who's responsible? I don't think it's Google. Maybe they're pretty powerful and based in our society, but Google is a good place to start. And this might be something that could be useful to you if it's not right now. If you go to Google and you type in nursing home compare, Medicare has a website with the ratings and information about all of the nursing homes that receive Medicare benefits and coverage. So type in nursing home compare. A page like this will pop up, and I'm going to use an example facility out in Redwood County. It's in Lamberton, nice small town, community nursing home, right? With good folks from Lamberton and that area working there. Smaller is better. Well, be careful about that thinking, which we'll get to in a minute. But when you go to the Nursing Home Compare website and you type in the city that you're interested in finding out about, it will pull up the nursing homes in that area. And here, Val and I can't read it, but you can see that there's a list of nursing homes. You can see some stars. That's related to the ratings that Medicare gives to the facilities. And it'll show you a map. So right there in the center is Lamberton, and then there's the other nursing homes that are nearby. So this is a nice place to start, because at the hospital, they are ready to discharge your mom. And there's a nice social worker there who works hard, who's under pressure to get your mom out of there. Pook talked about the Medicare funding for people in hospitals. Well, somebody's going to be telling that social worker that Gladys Jones needs to be discharged from here by 2:30 tomorrow afternoon. So her job is to help the family, apparently, to find a place that's available. And so that social worker, like everybody else, some are better than others. I assume most of them mean well, but they are under pressure to get people out of the hospital. If you ever feel like, why are we being pressured to get mom out by 2:30 tomorrow? It's because of the Medicare funding. And so I think that oftentimes the social worker doesn't care as much as you do about the quality of care that the facility that he or she's recommending might provide for your own mother, even though she knows enough that she wouldn't put her own mother there. But it's a licensed facility, they have an open bed, apparently they provide the services that your mom needs, so there you go. Well, on day one, after you call, when your mom's in the hospital, after you call your elder law lawyer about what to do strategy-wise in the hospital, start looking at available nursing homes right away so that you're smarter, more knowledgeable about what might be available, before you ever have this sort of pressure-filled, time-sensitive conversation with a social worker. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. This is one resource that I think is very valuable to anybody, even if you have a loved one in a care facility right now. Check it out. You'll learn things. I promise you that. It may be good stuff. It may be concerning things. So here's Valley View Manor. I clicked on that list on the page before that had Valley View at the top, and now we're going to learn more about Valley View Manor. It has an overall rating of 1 star. 1 is bad. And then there's different categories for that rating, which includes their health inspections, the staffing, quality measures. And in this case, the health inspections gives 1 star. For this nice nursing home in a nice town, you would think that it's the local folks working there taking care of their own. Let me go back. When you click on where I've got it circled there, there's a few inspection results at the bottom, which I know you can't see, but if you're looking at the website, you can see that. You click on that. And now we're going to learn about these health inspections. And the website will list the most recent inspection. This one was in August of 2023, and below that, you can click on a link that will pull up the inspection report. Well, you might want to know that because in this case, the facility got 20 citations for healthcare deficiencies in that inspection. And down here, it'll compare with the average in the United States. So the average number of citations in the United States for that same time period is 9.5. This place got over twice the number of citations for health deficiencies as the national average, and then in Minnesota, the Minnesota average was 7.4 citations. Okay, well, what does that tell us? You can go into complaints. People file complaints against the nursing home for care. It could be a family member, it could be the resident themselves, it could be a doctor at the hospital or a nurse. These are complaints that are filed with the Department of Health or Medicare against this facility. And in this case, you can, well, in all cases, you can actually open up the investigation report that was conducted. So if you fold report, click on that, you can open the report. The number of complaints in the last 3 years that resulted in citations, 13 of these complaints resulted in a citation. And in addition to complaints by most people, there's also complaints filed by the facility itself or somebody in the facility. A nurse might not like what they've seen, but also mandatory reporters. They're supposed to report things that they know to be neglect or abuse or even suspect is neglect and abuse. So there were 9 times in the last 3 years that when somebody from the nursing home reported a concern, it resulted in a citation. Penalties. Nursing homes get penalties for not doing a good job. In this case, that facility in Lamberton received 2 penalty findings that added up to almost $40,000 in fines that they had to pay for not providing the care that they were supposed to. And in addition to that, this would be Medicare. Medicare will refuse to pay for care in instances where they know it was improper care. And there were 2 instances in this time period where Medicare refused to pay the facility for the care that the facility claimed that it provided for somebody that was not proper. So another thing that we look at too, we tend to see the same nursing homes and the same companies over and over again, but we always want to see and make sure that what we believe to be true is still true. But for-profit nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and more of the assisted living facilities are owned by for-profit companies than nursing homes are. But I think there's naturally, I don't want to say greed, in some cases there are, but you have executives now who are very interested in making money in their business endeavor. And so we look at whether it's a for-profit or not. In addition, we can look up, in this case, Margaret Operations LLC. That's the company, I'll call it a shell company that the big company creates to get the license for this facility. So we can start looking up the corporate information about that entity. When we do that, we can find out who the owners really are of this nice little Minnesota town nursing home. The owners are Jeffrey Aram, who's from New York, a guy from Israel, a guy from New York, and Ephraim Lahaski, a guy from New York. So, that's nice, interesting information, right? Well, what about this Ephraim Lahaski? Turns out he owns 300 nursing homes in 30 states. He has a troubled history in Pennsylvania, which is investigating him for his ownership and operation of nursing homes there, where he's the largest nursing home operator. And he also has a troubled history in Vermont and New York for his ownership. So why is Minnesota continuing to allow these folks to have a license to operate this nursing home when it's obviously being run so poorly? Well, the Star Tribune looked into that. This is from March of this year. Our state, you read about the paper, our legislature is trying to get more funding and so forth for these nursing homes to provide better care. It's not working. It's not working particularly with these for-profit facilities. And in this case, with regard to Ephraim Lahaski in particular, this is a quote from the article. Ephraim Lahaski has been accused by New York's Attorney General of diverting excessive funds from his nursing homes to contractors in which he has a financial interest. For example, he might be the owner of the physical therapy company or the pharmacy or these other entities that the nursing home has contracts with to provide services. So you're not even getting the market rate, you're not competing with other pharmacies to get the best deal for your residents. You're padding your own wallet by creating your own company to divert funds to. He has taken partial ownership of 4 Minnesota nursing homes in St. Paul, Duluth, Worthington, and Lamberton over the past decade, and all have Medicare's lowest 1-star quality rating. How about that nursing home where this tough fella fell out of the 3rd-story window? What kind of operation do they have? How much time do I have? 5 minutes, okay. This is known as the Estates at St. Louis Park, LLC. Again, this is a corporation that was created just to have this nursing home license. It's owned and operated by a larger company called Monarch. You'll see in the right-hand corner there's a red circle with a white hand in it. That's not a good thing for the nursing home. And it's something that a consumer would want to know about. It means that they've had problems recently with neglect or abuse. If instead of a red circle, it's a yellow triangle, that means that this facility not only has had problems with abuse and neglect, it's been a continuing problem for us for a long time. So if you're thinking about a facility that the social worker is promoting as having a bed open to take care of mom and dad, and you see a red circle or a yellow triangle especially, you might want to really dig in or have a game plan for how you're going to keep your eye out for that loved one while they're there, or to find another facility. So in this case, the Estates at St. Louis Park has 19 citations for health problems, health care deficiencies, again, compared over twice the rate nationally and almost 3 times the rate in Minnesota. They've had 16 complaints. 22 complaints have been filed by people that work in the facility itself or by the facility itself because it's a mandatory report. And then fines. They've been fined repeatedly by Medicare for failing to provide proper care. That's almost $300,000 that this company has had to pay in fines. Now, I can't tell you, I'm sure they have lawyers and they fight everything. So in the end, I don't know if this number means they actually wrote or paid money for these fines, or that's what they were fined, and then that's when the lawyers get involved and start fighting about what actually has to be paid back. It's not a good, you don't see these things advertised on their websites or their pamphlets. But that's why this is almost all from that nursing home compare website. So if you have somebody in a nursing home now, check it out. It's knowledge. There's always more knowledge to get, but it's important knowledge. And if it's a good facility, that will be comforting too. Or if they get good ratings and good performance is good. So, I think the next slide is thank you. I might have a minute or two yet. I was right. Yes?
What is the cadence of inspections? Like, is it every 2 years, like, or is CHS?
Yeah, so the question is the cadence or how often do these governmental inspections take place? And they take place, it's not exactly annually, it's like every, I think, 14 to 18 months. Medicare and the state need to perform their inspections. The facility is not supposed to know that the inspection is coming, but they get, especially if it's a bigger company that operates lots of nursing homes, they should have a unique ability to pinpoint when it's going to happen. So I don't know if somebody's tipping them off, or they're so good at predicting when these things are going to be. But when those inspections occur, oftentimes at the poorly performing facilities, all of a sudden there's all kinds of care staff on the floor. The administrative places out there, the director of nursing, who's the manager, is out there providing that safe care. And in some cases, we're able to actually get people from the facility to testify about the deceit that goes on there. There's a case, I'll get to you in just a second, Jim, but there's a case we had where a family member, the nursing home resident, the facility that was doing like a mock survey or inspection, and the person who went into this resident's room, who probably was mildly compromised mentally, thought that it really was the state inspector coming in. She said, "Oh, well, thank God, you're finally here. Let me tell you what's going on." Well, it was one of the corporate people coming in pretending that they were a state investigator, and didn't say that. So there's a lot to these inspections that when the Department of Health or CMS, gets it right, we always celebrate that, because there's a lot of cases we read and say, how could they come to that conclusion that there wasn't a problem? Jim Dostal.
Yes. What about transitional care units?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because nursing homes have different levels of care that they can charge for. Transitional care units are the ones that are a higher fiscal margin for the facility. That's where you should be getting therapy and other services to help you get better as a patient, so you can get out of the transition out of the transitional care unit. But if you're not getting that care, you're not getting the services you need to get better and to transition out of the TCU. Other high-end ticket items financially for the nursing homes are ventilators. Not a lot of the nursing homes provide or offer ventilator care. Some offer ventilator care, and in our business we see that they didn't actually provide it. But it's a high reimbursement rate for them for a ventilator case. I don't know if I get all of your thoughts on that question, Jim, but that's one of my observations. Yes?
Could you talk about the legalities around installing a camera in a residence room?
Yeah, there have been some changes in the law, and I can't give you legal advice on it, only because I don't want to reply. Number two, I always have to look it up to make sure, because there was a change in the law. Generally, I believe what I'm about to say to be true, that you have a right to put a camera in your room. You have to, I believe, give the facility notice that you're going to do that, which seems like it kind of obviates the reason you have a camera. And the quality of the camera can make a difference too in terms of what you're getting. But yeah, there was a change in the law about 3 years ago, I believe it was, well, since the pandemic, that allows, by law, you can have a camera in the room, but there's steps you have to go through to be able to properly do that. What would happen if you just went ahead and put a secret camera or any camera in the room, nobody knows about it, and you happen to capture things that confirm your suspicions for why you put the camera in there? I'm not sure what the consequence is. And that falls into the category of sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. But that's what I would want to look at if I was going to get smart about the cameras. I'm sorry, I don't have a reliable answer.
It's my understanding that it's legal but you have to fill out some forms.
She said it's her understanding that it is legal to have cameras, but there are steps that you have to go through to properly do that. And that's basically my understanding as well. Were there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is it reasonable to expect a facility in Lamberton, Minnesota to comply with the standards of the metro area?
Well, so the nursing home standard is the national standard. The defense is always, well, it's the community standard. You know, we're only as good as, we only have to do what others in our community have to do. Well, what's the community? And the community, if it's Lamberton, there's only one nursing home in Lamberton. So why don't we take a look at, that picture of the other facilities on the map that are nearby? Some of those facilities have 3 stars, there might be a 4-star facility, there were a few with 1 stars. The nice thing about it is if it goes to a jury trial, the judge is going to tell the jury, yes, you've heard experts testify about what is the standard of care or not. But you, the jury, determine what the standard of care is for your community. So we try to emphasize that. The facility in Lamberton has to follow the same national regulations. They're regulated by Medicare, which is federal. And when the Department of Health of Minnesota conducts an investigation, it's conducting that investigation not only for Minnesota, but by contract for CMS, for Medicare. So they wear 2 hats even though they're doing one thing. So it's a national standard. The nursing home and it's not like hospitals in the sense that if you had a small town hospital in Lamberton and you're going to compare that to Catholic Northwestern in the Twin Cities, that is a community standard. I mean, you just have different resources and things like that can make a difference. Or you might have neurosurgeons in Catholic Northwestern who don't have them out in Lamberton. So, but in a nursing home, there's administrator, director of nursing, medical director, nursing assistants, therapy, it's all the same type of people performing the services by law, federal law, and state law, whether you're in Lamberton or Indianapolis.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hi.
So if my
Hold on, let me bring the microphone because some people are not hearing the question. Maybe that.
Yes, you're right. Oh, pretty much. So my loved one, how do you have death certificate? What do I call you?
Well, first person to call is the doctor, because that doctor might actually be able to do something about it. And I would rather that you were able to avert the disaster. I mean, pressure sore can start at one point and only get worse. But if it's due to a lack of care, if you call me and it just opened up, it's an open wound, and you're concerned about it, or even if it's, the skin, anybody that's had babies to take care of and they get diaper rash, you don't ignore it. All of a sudden, you're really kicking into a higher gear to make sure that diaper rash doesn't get worse. Well, same thing, I don't mean to equate older folks or disabled folks with babies, but they're not able to take care of themselves the same way that we can take care of ourselves. And if there's redness, or if it's starting to get worse, but the skin hasn't broken open yet, absolutely call your doctor, or your mom's doctor, or your dad's doctor. Get them involved if they'll pay attention. Talk to sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing in the nursing home. Make sure that the people who are in charge of the nursing know about it. It's a dignity issue, but if there's any way that you can, in a dignified manner, photograph what you're seeing, so that you have a record of it. Because what gets charted in the, when there's a problem, what gets charted in the nursing home's record is some pretty creative writing, or no documentation at all. So the more documentation you have, dignified, and we're talking about looking at a part of your loved one's body, I wouldn't want to be in that position to have to do that. But it is important to be able to document and show, the charge nurse or the director of nursing, this is a problem. And if possible, get some medical intervention. Because the nursing home will have, standing orders, so to speak, that some doctor wrote and kind of rubber stamped long ago before your loved one was even in the nursing home. Well, if it's this stage or that stage or those stages of the wound, here's what you can do. Well, that may not be the right treatment for you. Or if they already had turning and repositioning as their care plan for your mom, are they doing it? Well, of course we're doing it. We do everything that we're supposed to do. Okay, well then we need to change the care plan because it's not working. What is the plan to help my mom now? And if turning and repositioning, if you're just turning your mom back onto her backside where the pressure point is, that doesn't heal it. It's just going to make it worse. So what is the plan to take care of my loved one? Your question is when you call me, it's after you've done whatever you can to try to make sure your mom's getting the attention, or your dad, your loved one. Make sure that they get the attention that they deserve. And if they're not getting it, you're going to keep telling the people in the nursing home, and then now you're becoming accountable because you're expecting them to do their job. They don't like that if they're not doing their job. Nobody wants to be told that they're not doing their job. But then all of a sudden, if you could get to the point where okay, why don't we chili for me? We had Mexican last night. I'm still very excited. You know what? I guess that's the timer. If you called me early on, I would tell you to contact the Department of Health so that they know about it. Will they do anything about it? It's hard to say because they might already be investigating other things at that nursing home, and this is one more thing that they're really interested in. Or it may seem like, why aren't they paying attention to it? The Ombudsman's office is, of course, a very important resource. And so early on, I would try and point you in the direction of how do we prevent this from getting worse. And then if it does get worse, if it becomes infected or if it's fatal, then we'll analyze, did the nursing home do what they were supposed to do to prevent this avoidable pressure. So it's kind of a long answer to a short question. Is time up?
We do one more question. I have the question. So,
Hold on, Tracy. Get you a microphone.
I can just put them on.
Sorry.
Can you talk a little bit, just the definition of abuse? Because even for me, sometimes I will look at care that is happening in a care setting, and I'm not really clear that that's what abuse is, but someone else looking at it will say that that language is abusive.
Right.
That they can't talk that way to a resident. Can it help to understand the breadth of what abuse looks like?
Yeah, so I don't have a good answer for you that is just a bright line. Here's exactly what it is. There was a point where the United States Supreme Court was analyzing pornography, and they had a hard time defining what exactly is pornography. And one of the justices said, well, you know it when you see it. And it's a cop-out answer. It is true. Some neglect is so neglectful, why isn't that abuse? Some abuse is not an affirmative act, but more than neglect, it's failing to do something. Like if we had a case where there was a group home case, and the group home provider failed to get emergency medical attention for a 20-year-old person that she was responsible for caring for. And it's neglect, but she went to the dentist and left her husband or boyfriend to keep an eye on this vulnerable adult in a very compromised state. She was laying on the floor of the hallway. She had a lithium overdose from a low prescription with lithium. And I think that's abuse. But it's not the kind of abuse where you see somebody almost like any interview you watch on TV, these people are abusing each other. But you're in your face, you're just aggressively threatening somebody with your words. Or speaking of TMI, I have 2 daughters who have the pleasure of sharing a bunk bed for all the years at home. And my older daughter, they're like 6 and 9 or something. But my older daughter would tell me that younger daughter, hey, Andy, they're lying in bed and it's dark and they don't think anybody's listening. Andy, you're stupid. Hey, Andy, you're ugly. And I've never been a girl, and I've never had a sister or an older sister. I'm an only child, so I'm not sure exactly what abusive is, but it sure was mean. And certainly didn't have the confidence of somebody who was younger and looked up to her older sister. They get along great now, so it's like at the end of the story. And they are 2 very tough young women. But I think of that too, is that it's not a drug, it's abusive. And we have, sometimes video camera footage of just neglect of care. Nobody has come into this disabled person's room for 5 hours. That's a lot of video to watch, but it proves negative. Is that neglect? Or are you just choosing not to go in there? So I don't have a good answer. But I do, it seems like you know it when you see it. And frankly, maybe it makes a difference to somebody's license, whether it was neglect or abuse. But, from my perspective, there's grades of each, and the more obvious it is that it's one or the other, the easier it is to say which one it is. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you. There are definitions of it, but read the definitions and the regulations that go, okay, which one is it? Any other questions? I thought you'd have all kinds of questions for Margaret, not me. Do you have any questions, Margaret?
I don't have questions, but I would take questions from my presentation if you want.
I have a question for Margaret.
Yeah, thank you.
Hold on a second, let me get you a microphone, please, just so
I
everyone
had
can
no
hear.
idea why Joel was calling me that. I really do go by Pook in every circumstance. He didn't want to be overly friendly. I really, even the judges call me Pook. So go ahead with your question.
Oops.
Oh, turn it on,
Is
yes.
that- Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question has to do with appeal, power of attorney, and when that kicks in. So for example, you have a parent who has dementia, they're sort of denying that they need assistance. What kind of documentation or what types of things do you need from a doctor, or how does that sort of come into fruition if they're not willingly, giving over control, finances, or those types of things?
Right. So that happens all the time. It'll happen to us when we have to let go of the reins. So most powers of attorney that people are working with, in fact, I've only seen these, I haven't seen a screaming power of attorney, but when your parent signs that document and appoints you to be the attorney in fact, or partner, whatever it is, relationship, you are already empowered to act on their behalf. You don't have to wait for incapacity. You already have all the power that you need to go in, and I recommend that people bring that power of attorney to the bank and let the bankers know I am the attorney in fact. At some point, I may need to jump in and do things on behalf of my parent. So there's nothing that has to be established to sort of trigger it. You don't have to prove incapacity, that's the glory of it. It could be that your, parent decided to go to the cabin and not come back, and the CD is not supposed to be renewed automatically, so you have to go to the bank and stop the renewal. It's not that they're incapacitated, or in a coma, or has dementia, they're just busy at the lake. So, but you mentioned another thing, which is another part of this, which is how do we gracefully pass that baton of handling finances? And what I recommend is when somebody is in that situation, say, why don't I come over when you're paying your bills and we'll just hang out and have a, grilled cheese sandwich and talk, and you can get the bills, and I'll keep you company, and I'll learn your system. Show me the ropes. How do you like this done? One day I may have to do this. So you gently and are respectfully introducing yourself into, it's not that I don't think you can do it, but I'll mail them for you once you get them done. And then you kind of train me in on how you like this taken care of. Just like you taught me how to mow the lawn, you're going to teach me how to run your finances. So that one day when you don't have the ability, I'll do it the way you wanted me to do it. So that there's a very gentle transitional, eventually maybe I'll write all that other stuff out. You tell me what to write and then you sign it. And now you're a little deeper in, and then pretty soon it's like, you look tired, you take the nap, you've been doing this for months and months now. I'll finish it up here, I'll take care of it. So it's not easy, but there is a way to kind of work your way into the system and maybe have that sharing power feel a little bit more graceful. Yeah, go ahead, right here in the corner.
I was working with a patient of mine who was really hesitant to give power of attorney to one daughter, but she would consider it both for honor. So there's just because of that trust.
So your question is it a good idea to name two people at the same time? Some of my clients insist, I love them both the same, I want both daughters on the power of attorney, and then there is a spot on the power of attorney where it defines how they share power, like do they have to act together or can they act independent? My preference is that I like backups and I don't like committees, because committees can disagree and get all tied up and, we say where do you put an idea to die, and you give it to a committee. People talk about it for like 5 weeks, nothing happens. So I like centralized authority. But if my client refuses, then I put them both on, which means they're both the attorney, in fact, they're not successors, and then you check the box about how you want them to share power. So, but I strongly recommend first one and then a successor. I don't like it to be, I got a power of attorney and I had one person on, I'm like, great, well, you're half dressed, right? Because that person's going to be sick too, or going to be in the car wreck and die before you, and then you get no one. So we need a lot of people, a lot of backups on these documents. Go ahead, next question, Mike.
Yes, my father is doing 4, taking care of himself, runs the home with fault, is still very active. Separate his money.
Can you put your mic just that much closer to your face?
Closer?
Yeah.
Is it better? Okay, sorry. I've been told that my brother and I purchased the house for the estimated value of property taxes, give him the sale of the money, and now it's ours and we're going to come after it later, like that the county couldn't come after us because we bought the house, because we paid the estimated value of that.
Right, so it sounds like you have been counseled by maybe an elder law attorney that one way to protect the asset, your dad's asset, the house in 1984, is to just buy it from him. Don't buy it on the cheap, don't do a sweetheart deal. Look at the property tax statement, it says it's worth $550, and then the siblings pull together a bunch of money and give dad $550, and then you have protected the house. That's legal, there's nothing wrong with that, and when you go to medical assistance, your dad's going to have $550. Now, if your dad and mom are married, and then we're trying to protect that $550 by giving it to mom, and then transfers between spouses are not improper because we love marriage in Minnesota, in the United States, we love marriage. So we give the money to the spouse, we annuitize it, Bob's your uncle, dad's on medical assistance. So it protects the house. A lot of times people want to protect the house because they have a lot of equity in it, and it's going to appreciate more in value, and so this is going to be good for everybody. One thing, well, and then you will get a step up in basis tax-wise when you go to sell. If you paid the money for it, then you do get a step up in basis to the value of what you paid. Because I'm always thinking about lots of things at the same time, like medical assistance, income tax, transfer issues, capital gains tax, probate. So you solve one problem and you create another, but it's not bad advice that you were given. And I don't know the other facts about spouses and stuff like that, but decent idea. Another question, go ahead.
This is regarding your healthcare directive.
Yeah.
How much power does the person named there have over your healthcare? I don't want to go to the home. I don't want to go to assisted living. All my people on my healthcare directive say I need to. My question is, how much power do they have?
I love this question because it's kind of nice in tandem with the other question I had about capacity. So you are in charge of your health care. Your healthcare agents are not. Unlike the power of attorney, you're in charge of your health care, and nobody can tell you what you need to do about your health care as long as you have capacity. So let's say you're in a coma, and your preference is, I don't want to be in a nursing home. But you're in a coma. We're not talking to you anymore because you're in a coma. So we're going to talk to your daughter, and she says, this is the best nursing home. I literally was Googling all my clients' nursing homes on that day while he was talking. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know? So check out the nursing homes, get you into a nice place. But if you're totally out of it, your healthcare agents are going to do what they think is best. Pick a healthcare agent who will not supplant their ideas for what they think you should have versus what you would have. You kind of have to pick a kid who will honor you. The tricky part is, I'm perfectly fine. What do you mean I have dementia? What was that? What did you say? I said, people who have dementia don't know they have dementia. And so they say, I'm not going to a nursing home, and then you're in sort of a struggle. And of course, the care facility or the hospital is going to know she has dementia. We're not going to listen to her anymore. We are going to listen to the daughter. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home. Nobody wants to go to assisted living. I've already told my kids, I said this to my son in law school, and I've told my kids, when I get older, please don't, break your back or anything, trying to take care of me. Find me a good facility. Just find me a good facility. It's too much work. Find me a good facility. He said to me the other day, Mom, I just want to check. You did say I could put you in a nursing home, right? And I was like, the lady said that. It's like, well, not tomorrow. So, but I think it's likely that I'll end up in a care facility. I think it's likely we all will. Because unless, we get the quick ticket and we're out. But most of us end up having a period of time. This is really, that's kind of how I roll. This is the world I live in. Most of us will have a period of time when it will be too hard for our loved ones to do work. And then I want to be in the hands of professionals that get the 5-star, not the 1-star. Anyone else have questions about the stuff that I was talking about?
My only question is, can we get a copy of your slides?
Her question is, can you get a copy of my slides? That's wonderful, because Tracy asked me that question, and I said, I'm not comfortable with that. But now that you asked me that question, this is where I'm a sucker for someone who's older. Yes, you can have a copy of my slides. I stand by my work. There's not time changing those slides. So, thanks so much. You guys have been a fabulous audience, and thanks for inviting us.
I know that all of us who work at Starkey learned a lot today, and so I hope you all learned something too. Denise has evaluations, if you could take a minute to fill out an evaluation. And there was something that I forgot to mention earlier. Start Senior Solutions is a nonprofit organization, and on your table there are some envelopes. If you feel like making a donation, please do. You're not obligated by any means. Right now, START is 100% funded by individual donors, and that is a phenomenal achievement. So thank you to everyone who has been supporting the organization, because we know the work that we do is important, and we change lives, and so we only do that because of you, so thank you so very much.